They expected submission. They expected fear. They expected another species to bow before their mighty fleet and beg for mercy like countless others had done across 1,000 conquered worlds. Instead, they got Captain Sarah Chun walking into their command ship, carrying the severed head of their most decorated admiral in a simple metal box. She didn't come to surrender. She didn't come to negotiate from weakness. She came to deliver a message that would shake the foundations of the Zorathi Empire and change the balance of power across the stars forever. This is the story of how one human's impossible act of defiance turned a hopeless war into humanity's greatest victory. A tale of courage, sacrifice, and the terrifying realization that in a galaxy full of predators, humans might just be the apex hunters they never saw coming. Prepare yourself for a journey that will redefine what it means to be the underdog in a universe where survival depends on making the right choice in the face of overwhelming odds. The silence in the command center of a UES Defiance felt heavy enough to crush bones. Captain Sarah Chun stood before the massive viewport, watching the Zorathi war fleet emerge from hyperspace like metal sharks sensing blood in the water. Each ship stretched longer than 3 city blocks, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. 47 ships confirmed, Captain, reported Lieutenant Torres from his sensor station, his voice barely steady. All Dreadnought class or larger. Each one outguns our entire defensive fleet combined. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the reinforced glass, showing a woman in her mid-30s with steel-gray eyes and prematurely silver hair pulled back in a regulation bun. 3 years of defending humanity's outer colonies had left their mark on her face, carved in lines of determination and sacrifice. She wore the blue uniform of the United Earth Space Navy with the kind of confidence that came from facing impossible odds and somehow surviving. How long until they reach Earth's defensive perimeter? She asked without turning around. 18 hours at their current speed, Torres replied. Admiral Rodriguez wants all ships to fall back to the Luna defense grid. Sarah finally turned from a viewport, her boots clicking against the metal deck as she walked toward the holographic display showing the solar system. Red dots marked the approaching Zorathi fleet, while blue dots showed Earth's pathetically small defensive force. The numbers told a story that ended with humanity's extinction. "Belay that order," Sarah said quietly. "We're not running." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Commander Jack Morrison, her first officer and oldest friend, stepped closer to her side. They had served together for 12 years, from their academy days through the brutal frontier wars against the Krell pirates. He was the only person aboard who could speak to her like an equal. "Sarah, we've got 8 ships against their 47. This isn't brave, it's suicide," Jack whispered. "Maybe," she replied, studying the tactical display with the intensity of a predator planning a hunt. "But I've been thinking about something Admiral Voss told me before he died." Jack's expression softened. Admiral Voss had been Sarah's mentor and the closest thing to a father she'd known since her parents died in the Mars colony attack. The old man had saved her career more than once and taught her that sometimes the impossible was just another word for something nobody had tried yet. He said the Zorathi have conquered 43 species in the last 200 years. Every single one surrendered after the first battle. They expect submission because that's all they've ever received. "What are you suggesting?" Jack asked, though his tone suggested he already knew and didn't like the answer. "I'm suggesting we give them something they've never seen before. A species that fights back." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief science officer, looked up from her station where she'd been analyzing the Zorathi ships. "Captain, I've been studying their formation. It's purely ceremonial, designed for intimidation rather than combat efficiency. They're used to enemies who fold at the sight of their fleet." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. They're not expecting a fight, which means they're not prepared for one." She turned to face her crew, seeing fear mixed with determination in their eyes. These were good people, volunteers who had joined the Space Navy to explore the stars and defend humanity's colonies. None of them had signed up for a war against an empire that had crushed dozens of worlds. "I won't lie to you," Sarah said, her voice carrying to every corner of the bridge. The odds are terrible. We're probably going to die out here. But if we do, we'll die as humans, not as slaves begging for mercy. The communication station crackled to life. Lieutenant Kim Park, barely 22 and fresh from the academy, looked pale as she adjusted her headset. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Zorathi flagship. They're demanding we acknowledge their superiority and prepare for subjugation protocols. Put on the main screen, Sarah ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing a creature that looked like evolution's nightmare. Admiral Vex Thar stood 8 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms ending in clawed hands. His skin was deep purple scaled hide that looked tough enough to stop bullets. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils regarded the human bridge crew with obvious contempt. When he spoke, his voice came through the translation system as a low growl filled with authority. Primitive creatures of the third planet, I am Admiral Vex Thar of the Zorathi Imperial Navy. Your species will submit to the glory of the Empire or face complete extermination. You have 1 standard hour to surrender your fleets and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your entire world. Sarah stepped forward so the alien could see her clearly. Admiral Vex Thar, I am Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Navy. Thank you for the generous offer, but we respectfully decline. The alien's eyes narrowed with what might have been surprise. You refuse? Your 8 ships against our fleet? This is either madness or stupidity beyond measure. Actually, it's just human nature, Sarah replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We have a saying here, the harder they come, the harder they fall. Vex Thar's mandibles clicked in what the translation system interpreted as laughter. Your bravado is amusing, but pointless. We have crushed species far more advanced than yours. The Kelthani had shields that could deflect starfire. The Morgoth possessed weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Where are they now? Serving the Empire in whatever capacity we deem useful. I'm sure they were impressive, Sarah said. But they weren't human. The transmission cut off abruptly. Sarah turned back to her crew, seeing new resolve in their faces. Fear remained, but it was now mixed with something more dangerous. Anger. All right, people. We have 18 hours to prepare for the fight of our lives. I want every system checked, every weapon loaded, and every backup system online. We're going to show these aliens what happens when you threaten Earth. Commander Morrison took a step closer. What's the plan, Captain? We can't win a straight fight. We don't fight straight, Sarah replied. We fight smart. Dr. Vasquez, I need everything you can tell me about Zorathi technology. Their ships, their weapons, their tactical preferences. Everything. I've been analyzing their fleet composition, Elena said, calling up detailed schematics on her workstation. Their ships are powerful, but they rely heavily on energy shielding and directed energy weapons. They seem to have minimal kinetic defenses. Interesting. What about their command structure? Highly centralized. The flagship coordinates all fleet movements. If we could somehow disable or destroy it, the rest of the fleet would be in chaos, Sarah finished. Like cutting the head off a snake. Jack frowned. Even if that's true, their flagship is their most heavily defended ship. It's surrounded by a screen of destroyers and has more armor than the rest of their fleet combined. Sarah walked back to the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The Zorathi fleet hung in space like a sword over Earth's head, confident and seemingly untouchable. But every sword had a weak point, every fortress had a flaw. She just had to find it. Torres, show me the composition of the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The display shifted to show the rocky debris field that surrounded the solar system's inner planets. Thousands of rocks from pebble-sized to mountain-sized drifted in their ancient orbits, mined for resources but still containing vast amounts of raw material. Bring up the mining platforms, Sarah ordered. Specifically, the heavy excavation units. Dr. Vasquez looked confused. Captain, those platforms are designed for mining asteroids, not space combat. No, but they're designed to move very large rocks with precision, Sarah said with a growing smile. And I'm betting the Zorathi have never seen anyone use the solar system itself as a weapon. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah's plan was audacious, borderline insane, and had a dozen points where everything could go wrong. It also had one crucial advantage. No one in the galaxy would see it coming. The human fleet repositioned itself among the asteroid belt, using the mining platforms to carefully nudge several large asteroids into new trajectories. To outside observers, it would look like normal mining operations. The rocks would take hours to reach their new positions, but timing was everything. Meanwhile, the crew of the Defiance prepared for the most important performance of their lives. Sarah had decided that if humanity was going to make first contact with the galactic empire, they were going to do it in a way that would be remembered forever. Captain, Lieutenant Park reported from communications, the Zorathi fleet is accelerating. They'll reach our position in 2 hours. Sarah nodded. Signal the fleet. All ships are to maintain current positions until my order. No one moves until I give the word. Jack appeared at her shoulder. Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. She looked at her oldest friend, seeing the trust in his eyes despite his fears. Jack, my grandfather fought in World War III. Before he died, he told me something I've never forgotten. He said that sometimes the most important battles aren't about winning or losing. They're about proving that some things are worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. And you think this is one of those times? Sarah turned back to the viewport where the Zorathi fleet was growing larger by the minute. I think that if we're going to die today, we're going to die in a way that tells the galaxy exactly who humans are. We don't surrender. We don't bow. And we sure as hell don't go quietly. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. In 2 hours, they would either pull off the most audacious military action in human history or become a footnote in the story of Earth's conquest. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn that humanity was unlike any species it had ever encountered. As the enemy fleet approached, Sarah began to smile. Admiral Vexthar expected another easy victory, another species to add to his empire's collection. Instead, he was about to discover why humans had fought their way up from the bottom of Earth's food chain to become the dominant species on their planet. The hunt was about to begin, and for the first time in galactic history, humans weren't going to be the prey. Admiral Vexthar stood in the command center of his flagship Dominion's Edge, a vessel so massive it could serve as a mobile fortress. The bridge itself was larger than most human buildings, designed to showcase the power and authority of the Zorathi Empire. Holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in his fleet, each one a testament to imperial engineering and military might. Status report, he demanded, his 4 arms moving in the complex gestures that indicated supreme confidence in Zorathi body language. Commander Thekval, his second-in-command, consulted the tactical displays with the efficiency of a career military officer. The primitive fleet maintains position in the asteroid field. 8 ships, apparently using the rocks for cover. Their tactics are predictable and desperate. Vexthar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Of course they are. Every species attempts the same strategies when faced with imperial might. Hide among debris, attempt ambush tactics, hope for a miracle that will never come. He gestured toward the main display showing the human fleet. Have any of their ships attempted to flee? No, Admiral. All vessels remain in formation. Interesting. Usually by now, at least some ships would have broken ranks to warn their home world. These humans display an unusual commitment to hopeless causes. Navigation Officer Zexmore looked up from her station, confusion clear in her large dark eyes. Admiral, the humans are conducting some kind of industrial operation in the asteroid field. Our sensors detect significant movement of large rock formations. Vexthar's attention sharpened. In 40 years of military service, he had conquered 17 different species and assisted in the subjugation of 12 others. Each victory had followed the same pattern. Show overwhelming force, accept surrender, begin occupation protocols. The humans were already deviating from the expected script. Explain, he ordered. They appear to be using mining equipment to relocate several large asteroids. The rocks are being moved into different orbital patterns around their ships. Defensive fortifications, Commander Thekval suggested, creating artificial barriers to protect their vessels. Vexthar was less certain. The asteroid movements seemed too complex for simple defensive positions. There was a pattern here, something his tactical computers couldn't interpret. Continue monitoring. Increase sensor resolution on the human fleet. Admiral, communications specialist Kexlon interrupted. We're receiving another transmission from the human flagship. Display it. Captain Chen's image appeared on the main screen, standing calmly on her bridge, despite being outnumbered 6-1. Vexthar had to admit the human displayed remarkable composure for a primitive about to face extinction. Admiral Vexthar, Chen said with what the translation system identified as respectful formality. I wanted to thank you for being so patient during our preparations. Preparations for what, Captain? Your surrender? Actually, preparations for a demonstration. You see, humans have a tradition of showing hospitality to visitors. Since this is your first time in our solar system, we wanted to give you a proper welcome. Vexthar felt the first stirring of unease. In his experience, when primitive species started talking about demonstrations and hospitality, they were usually planning something desperate and stupid. I'm not interested in your primitive customs. Oh, but this one is special. You mentioned earlier that you've conquered many advanced species. The Kelthani with their stellar shields, the Morgoth with their planet-killing weapons. Impressive civilizations, I'm sure. What is your point? Chen's expression grew more serious. My point, Admiral, is that for all their advanced technology, none of those species had something that humans possess in abundance. Which is what? Creativity born from desperation. You see, when humans are backed into a corner with no hope of survival, we don't just fight. We innovate. We adapt. We find ways to turn the battlefield itself into a weapon. The transmission ended, leaving Vexthar staring at empty space. Around the bridge, his crew exchanged uncertain glances. After centuries of easy conquests, they were facing something new, an enemy that seemed genuinely unafraid. Admiral, Tactical Officer Vexrin reported, the human fleet is moving. All ships are accelerating toward our outer perimeter. Vexthar's attention snapped back to the tactical display. The 8 human ships had left their hiding places among the asteroids and were approaching his fleet in a loose formation. Their movement was direct, almost casual, as if they were heading to a peaceful meeting rather than certain destruction. How long until they reach weapons range? 12 minutes at current velocity. Signal the fleet. All ships are to maintain defensive positions. When the humans enter range, we will demonstrate Imperial firepower by destroying them quickly and completely. But even as he gave the order, Vexthar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. The humans were behaving unlike any species he had ever encountered. They showed no fear, made no desperate last-minute attempts to negotiate, and seemed almost eager to engage a superior force. Admiral, Communications Specialist Kexlon said urgently, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the asteroid field. Elaborate. The large asteroids the humans moved earlier are beginning to accelerate. They're leaving their orbital positions. Vexthar studied the sensor readings, his tactical experience finally recognizing the pattern. The humans hadn't been building fortifications. They had been positioning weapons. Massive, kinetic weapons that his energy-based defenses were never designed to stop. How large are these asteroids? He demanded. The smallest is approximately 2 kilometers in diameter. The largest? Zexmore paused, double-checking her readings. The largest is nearly 8 kilometers across and massed at approximately 4 billion tons. Impossible. No species has the technology to accelerate objects of that size with any meaningful velocity. The humans aren't using their ship engines, Navigation Officer Zexmore reported with growing alarm. They're using the asteroid's own mining charges. Massive explosive detonations positioned to create controlled thrust vectors. Commander Thekval studied the tactical display with the expression of someone watching their carefully planned strategy crumble. Admiral, at their current acceleration, those rocks will impact our outer ships in 18 minutes. Our point defense systems are designed for missiles and fighters, not mountain-sized projectiles. Vexthar felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans had turned his overwhelming numerical advantage into a liability. His ships were positioned in the traditional Imperial formation, designed to showcase power rather than provide maneuverability. They were perfect targets for weapons that couldn't be stopped by conventional defenses. Signal the fleet. All ships are to scatter and assume combat dispersal pattern. But even as his orders went out, Vexthar knew it was too late. His massive dreadnoughts needed time to build velocity, time to change course. The humans had timed their attack perfectly, using the Zorathi Empire's own tactical doctrine against them. On the main screen, the human fleet continued its approach, still moving with that same casual confidence. Behind them, 8 massive asteroids accelerated through space like guided mountains, their surfaces glowing from the heat of atmospheric friction as they built speed. Admiral, Tactical Officer Vexrin reported, his voice tight with professional fear, the lead asteroid will impact the Merciless Judgment in 14 minutes. Captain Colvin is requesting permission to abandon ship. Denied. All ships will maintain formation and attempt evasive action. Sir, the Merciless Judgment masses 12 million tons. The approaching asteroid masses 4 billion tons and is accelerating at nearly 100 gravities. There is no evasive action possible. Vexthar watched the tactical display with growing horror as the reality of the situation became clear. The humans had somehow managed to accelerate asteroids to velocities that would make them unstoppable kinetic weapons. When those rocks hit his ships, they wouldn't just destroy them. They would obliterate them so completely that nothing recognizable would remain. Ow, he muttered. How did primitives develop such technology? Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice came through the communication system as if she had heard his question. Admiral, you're thinking about this all wrong. We didn't develop new technology. We just used what was already here in a way you never considered. The transmission showed the interior of Captain Chen's ship, where the human science officer stood next to a holographic display showing the solar system. You see, every star system is full of potential weapons. Asteroids, comets, gas giants, even the star itself. But it takes a species that's used to fighting with limited resources to see the possibilities. Vexthar realized with growing dread that the human fleet was now within weapons range of his outer ships. All vessels, open fire. Destroy the human fleet immediately. Energy beams lanced out from 47 Zorathi ships, enough firepower to glass a continent. The space around the human vessels lit up with directed energy that should have vaporized them instantly. Instead, the human ships seemed to dance between the beams, their smaller size and superior maneuverability allowing them to avoid the worst of the barrage. Where energy did connect, their ship's armor absorbed the damage with surprising effectiveness. Their hulls are designed to dissipate directed energy. Weapons Officer Hextau reported with professional admiration. They've anticipated our primary armament and prepared countermeasures. Then, use kinetic weapons. Admiral, our kinetic systems are designed for ship-to-ship combat. We have no weapons capable of stopping asteroid-sized projectiles. On the main screen, Captain Chun appeared again, still standing calmly on her bridge despite the energy barrage surrounding her ship. Admiral Vexthar, I hope you're beginning to understand the situation. You came here expecting another easy conquest, another primitive species to add to your collection. Instead, you're facing a species that's been fighting for survival since before recorded history. The first asteroid struck the Merciless Judgment with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The impact was visible from millions of kilometers away as the massive dreadnought simply ceased to exist, replaced by an expanding cloud of superheated debris. 7 ships down, 40 remaining, Captain Chin observed. At this rate, we should have your fleet reduced to manageable numbers in about 20 minutes. Vexthar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in Zorathi physiology. Impossible. Your species couldn't have developed such sophisticated tactics in the time since we made contact. You're right, Chin agreed. We've been developing these tactics for thousands of years. Every time humans faced a larger, stronger enemy, we learned to fight smarter instead of harder. We learned to turn their advantages against them. 2 more asteroids found their targets, destroying another pair of Zorathi dreadnoughts in brilliant explosions. The remaining human ships continued their approach, weaving through defensive fire with an agility that spoke of superior pilot training and ship design. Admiral, Commander Thekvel said urgently, "I recommend we withdraw to a safe distance and call for reinforcements." Novik Starsnarl. We are the Zorathi Imperial Navy. We do not flee from primitives. But even as he spoke, another asteroid struck home, and another of his ships died in fire. The humans had somehow managed to turn the solar system itself into a weapon, and his mighty fleet was being destroyed by flying rocks guided with impossible precision. Admiral, Communications Specialist Kexlon reported, "Captain Chun is requesting to speak with you again." Deny the transmission. "Sir, she says she has a proposal that might save the lives of your remaining crew." Vextar hesitated. He had lost 4 ships in as many minutes, with more asteroids still incoming. The human fleet, meanwhile, had taken only minor damage despite being outnumbered 6-1. "Put her through." Chin appeared on the screen, and for the first time, Vextar noticed that the human looked almost sad. "Admiral, you've lost 4 ships and nearly 20,000 crew members. This doesn't have to continue. You think I would surrender to primitives? I think you should consider the fact that humans aren't primitives. We're the most dangerous predators this galaxy has ever produced. We just never had a reason to hunt anything larger than ourselves before." Another asteroid found its mark, turning the heavy cruiser Imperial Wrath into cosmic dust. The psychological effect on his fleet was becoming obvious as ship commanders began requesting permission to break formation. "What do you propose?" Vextar asked, hating himself for the question. "Simple. You withdraw your fleet to a distance of 1 light year from our system. In return, we'll call off our asteroid bombardment and allow you to collect your survivors." "And then what?" "You think your 8 ships can dictate terms to the entire Zorathi Empire?" Chin's expression grew even more serious. "Admiral, I need you to understand something. Those 8 ships out there, that's not our entire fleet. That's just the ships we had available on short notice. Earth's entire defensive fleet numbers in the thousands, and every single one of them is crewed by humans who would rather die than surrender." She paused, letting that information sink in. "Your empire has conquered 43 species by showing overwhelming force and accepting their surrender. But humans don't surrender, Admiral. We fight, and the longer you stay in our system, the more creative our fighting methods are going to become." Vextar stared at the tactical display, where his once mighty fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons no civilized species would ever consider using. The humans had turned the very solar system into their ally, using mining equipment and explosives to create kinetic weapons of unimaginable power. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vextar was facing an enemy that truly frightened him. Not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their absolute refusal to accept defeat, even in the face of impossible odds. "I need time to consider your proposal," he said finally. "Of course," Chin replied. "But I should mention that we have 12 more asteroids en route to your position. You have approximately 15 minutes to decide." The transmission ended, leaving Vextar alone with the realization that everything the Zorathi Empire thought they knew about warfare was wrong. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species that couldn't be conquered by traditional methods. A species that turned desperation into innovation and innovation into devastating effectiveness. For the first time in 2 centuries, the Zorathi Empire had encountered something they had never seen before. A species that was more dangerous when cornered than when comfortable. The hunt had begun, but the predators and prey were not what anyone had expected. The observation deck of Admiral Vextar's flagship had never witnessed a sight like this. Through the reinforced transparent steel, the surviving officers of the Zorathi fleet watched their primitive enemy execute the most audacious military maneuver in recorded galactic history. Captain Sarah Chin's ship, the UES Defiance, accelerated directly toward the massive Zorathi flagship. Behind her, the remaining 7 human vessels had formed a perfect diamond formation, their engines burning at full power as they charged into the heart of the enemy fleet. To any observer, it looked like a desperate suicide run by a hopelessly outmatched force. Admiral Vex knew better. The humans had already demonstrated their capacity for turning apparent disadvantages into devastating weapons. This direct assault was something else entirely, something that made his tactical computers issue warnings he'd never seen before. "Admiral," Commander Thekval reported, his voice strained with disbelief, "the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're playing music. Music, some kind of rhythmic audio pattern. Our translation computers are identifying it as something called Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries. They appear to be using it as a psychological warfare technique." Vex listened to the strange, soaring melody that filled the communication channels. The primitive sounds seemed to energize the human ships, their formation tightening as they approached certain destruction. "Do they think noise will frighten us?" "Dr." Elena Vasquez's voice cut through the music on the command frequency. "Admiral Vex, that music represents something you need to understand about humans. It's from a story about warriors who choose to die gloriously rather than live in shame. The fact that we're playing it should tell you exactly how serious we are. You're about to die, Captain Vasquez. Your ships cannot possibly survive a concentrated barrage from my remaining fleet." "You're right," she agreed. "We can't survive a concentrated barrage. That's why we're not going to give you the chance to fire one." Through the viewport, Vex watched the human formation suddenly scatter. Instead of maintaining their suicidal charge, the 8 ships split apart like shrapnel from an explosion, each one taking a different vector through his fleet formation. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "All ships target the human vessels." But the humans were no longer where his targeting computers expected them to be. Their ships moved with an agility that seemed impossible for their size, dancing between the massive Zorathi dreadnoughts like fighters avoiding capital ship fire. Every time his gunners locked onto a target, the human ship would perform another impossible maneuver, slipping away at the last moment. "How are they moving like that?" Weapons Officer Hextal demanded. "Their acceleration curves are beyond anything in our database." The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Chen's voice carried across all frequencies, clear and confident despite the chaos surrounding her ship. "Admiral, you're thinking about this the wrong way again. Your ships are built for intimidation and overwhelming firepower. Ours are built for survival." The Defiance suddenly appeared on the flagship's starboard side, so close that Vex could see the individual hull plates on the human vessel. At this range, his point defense systems should have reduced it to scattered atoms. Instead, the human ship launched something that his sensors couldn't identify. Not a missile or an energy beam, but a small metallic object that attached itself to the flagship's hull with an audible clang. "Boarding pod," Commander Thekval realized with horror. "They're attempting to board the flagship. Impossible. No species attempts boarding actions against superior forces. The pod is cutting through our outer hull," Security Chief Korvac reported from a station. "Hull breach in Section 7. Intruders detected." Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly. In 40 years of military service, he had never heard of anyone attempting to board an enemy flagship during active combat. The tactical computers had no protocols for this situation because no rational species would attempt something so audaciously suicidal. "Deploy security teams to Section 7. Full weapons authorization." But even as his orders went out, more reports came in. The other human ships were also launching boarding pods, targeting his most important vessels with surgical precision. Within minutes, 7 of his ships reported intruders fighting their way toward critical systems. "Admiral," Communications Specialist Kexlon said urgently, "we're receiving multiple signals from the boarding parties. They're asking to speak with ship commanders." "Put them through." The main screen split into multiple views, showing the interior of 7 different Zorathi ships. In each one, human soldiers in powered armor stood among groups of Zorathi crew members. But instead of the carnage Vexthar expected, the scenes looked almost cordial. Admiral Vexthar, Captain Chin's voice came from the lead screen. I'd like you to meet some of my people. These are members of the United Earth Marine Corps, and they have something to show you. On each screen, a human Marine stepped forward holding a small metallic device. Vexthar recognized them immediately. Demolition charges, powerful enough to destroy a ship's reactor core from the inside. As you can see, Chun continued, we now control your 7 most powerful ships, including the reactors that power their weapon systems. We could detonate these charges and remove those ships from the battle, but that would mean killing thousands of your crew members. Marine Sergeant Jackson Torres appeared on the screen from the heavy cruiser Eternal Dominance. He was a massive man in powered armor that made him look like a walking tank. Admiral, my orders are to give your crews 30 seconds to evacuate critical sections before I blow the reactor. But Captain Chin thought you might want to discuss alternatives. Vexthar stared at the screens in amazement. The humans had somehow managed to board 7 of his ships simultaneously, fight their way to critical systems, and then offer mercy to their enemies. It was tactically brilliant and strategically incomprehensible. What do you want? He asked. Simple, Chin replied. We want you to understand who you're dealing with. Your empire has conquered dozens of species by demonstrating overwhelming force and accepting their surrender. But humans don't think that way. She gestured, and her Marines on each ship held up additional items. Medical supplies, emergency rations, portable atmosphere generators. When humans board an enemy ship, we don't just bring weapons. We bring everything needed to keep enemy crew members alive after we disable their vessel. Why? Because we understand something your empire has forgotten. Every species you've conquered had something valuable to offer. Knowledge, culture, technology, perspective. When you destroy a species through conquest, you're throwing away everything they might have contributed to the galaxy. On the tactical display, Vexthar could see that the situation had become completely untenable. His most powerful ships were compromised, his fleet was scattered, and he was facing an enemy that seemed to consider impossible tactics as standard operating procedure. What are your terms? He asked finally. Chin's expression grew serious. First, you withdraw your fleet to the edge of our solar system. Second, you establish formal diplomatic contact with Earth government. Third, you agree to a prisoner exchange for the crew members we're about to evacuate from your compromised ships. And if I refuse? Marine Sergeant Torres spoke up from his screen. Then, we detonate the charges, disable 7 of your ships, and continue this conversation with whatever's left of your fleet. But, Admiral, I should mention that humans have a saying, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The choice is yours. Vexthar found himself in a position he had never experienced before, being dictated terms by a species he had intended to conquer. The humans had somehow managed to turn a hopeless defensive battle into a negotiating position of strength. You realize, he said slowly, that even if I agree to your terms, the Empire will send more fleets. Larger ones. We're counting on it, Chin replied with a smile that made Vexthar's blood run cold. Admiral, what you've seen today is 8 ships and their crews using basic defensive tactics with minimal preparation time. Imagine what humanity could accomplish with months to prepare and our entire fleet at our disposal. Dr. Vasquez appeared on the screen next to Chun. Admiral, we've been analyzing your ship designs and tactical doctrines during this engagement. Your technology is impressive, but it's designed for fighting enemies who operate under the same assumptions you do. You've never faced a species that treats impossible odds as a starting point for creative problem solving. What are you saying? I'm saying that every tactical doctrine in your database assumes enemies will behave rationally. But human military doctrine is based on the assumption that rational behavior is a luxury we can't afford when survival is at stake. Another voice joined the conversation, this one from the bridge of the human ship Indomitable. Commander Lisa Park, Sarah Chin's counterpart on the heavy cruiser, appeared on screen. Admiral, human military history is full of battles where small forces defeated much larger ones through superior tactics, better preparation, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. This is what we do. Vexthar studied the tactical situation one more time. 7 of his ships were compromised, his fleet was scattered, and he was facing an enemy that had somehow managed to turn every advantage he possessed into a liability. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that violated every assumption the Zarathi Empire held about warfare and primitive species. "I agree to your terms," he said finally. "But I warn you, the Empire will not accept this defeat lightly." "We hope not," Chen replied, "because the next time your Empire decides to threaten Earth, we'll be ready for them. And, Admiral, next time we won't be nearly so polite." The transmission ended, leaving Vexthar staring at displays showing his own crew members being carefully evacuated from compromised ships by human marines who treated enemy personnel with more consideration than many species showed their own people. In the space of 6 hours, everything the Zarathi Empire thought it knew about warfare had been proven wrong. They had encountered a species that couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be defeated through conventional tactics, and couldn't be conquered through traditional methods. As his fleet began the humiliating withdrawal from the Sol system, Vexthar realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. Somewhere among the stars, there was now a species that could stand against the Empire and win. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun. Behind them, 8 human ships maintained formation as they escorted the Zarathi fleet to the edge of the system. To any outside observer, it would have looked impossible. A handful of ships from a primitive species dictating terms to one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. But Admiral Vexthar was beginning to understand something that would change the Empire forever. When humans said something was impossible, they weren't admitting defeat. They were simply describing the starting conditions for their next victory. 3 months later, Admiral Vexthar stood in the war room of the Imperial High Command on Zarath Prime, facing the most humiliating moment of his long military career. The chamber was built to intimidate, with its soaring ceilings covered in holographic displays showing the Empire's conquered territories. 43 species paid tribute to Zarathi supremacy, their worlds marked in imperial gold across the galaxy map. Today, one small system glowed red. Humanity's solar system, the first territory to successfully resist imperial conquest in over 2 centuries. Admiral Vexthar, Grand Marshal Kolthek, rumbled from the Central Command throne, his massive form radiating disapproval. "Explain to this council how your fleet of 47 ships failed to subdue 8 primitive vessels." Vexthar had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but the shame still burned in his throat like acid. "Grand Marshal, the humans employed tactics outside all known military doctrine. They weaponized their own solar system and demonstrated capabilities that our intelligence estimates failed to predict." "Capabilities such as what?" Supreme Admiral Hexgorth demanded from his position at the tactical display. The aged military leader bore scars from dozens of campaigns, and his yellow eyes held no sympathy for failure. They accelerated asteroid-sized masses to kinetic velocities sufficient to destroy our heaviest ships. They employed boarding tactics during active fleet engagement. Most significantly, they demonstrated a complete unwillingness to surrender even when facing certain death. "Primitives with mining equipment," Grand Marshal Kolthek dismissed. "Are we to believe that the Imperial Navy was defeated by industrial tools?" Intelligence Director Vex Shala stepped forward, her sleek form carrying the data tablets that had consumed her department for months. "Grand Marshal, with respect, that analysis oversimplifies the situation. Our xenobiological and tactical assessments have revealed disturbing patterns in human behavior." She activated a holographic display showing Earth's history of warfare. Humans have been engaged in continuous armed conflict for over 6,000 years. Their entire evolutionary development occurred under conditions of resource scarcity and territorial competition. They are, in essence, a warrior species that has never known true peace. "Every species fights," Supreme Admiral Hexgorth pointed out. "What makes humans different? The scale and sophistication of their warfare, Vexshala replied, changing the display to show human military innovations. In just the last century, they developed nuclear weapons capable of destroying their own planet, chemical weapons that could exterminate entire populations, and biological warfare systems that could eliminate all life on a world. Against their own species? Yes. Humans regularly wage war against other humans using weapons that could end their civilization. They consider this normal behavior. Grand Marshal Kolthek's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought in Zarathi psychology. Show me their current military capabilities. The display shifted to show intelligence gathered during the recent engagement. Our sensors detected over 3,000 active military vessels in their home system alone. Each ship appears to be purpose-built for combat rather than intimidation. Their technology is approximately 50 years behind our most advanced systems, but their tactical doctrine compensates for technical limitations. Admiral Vexthar found his voice. Grand Marshal, I must stress that these humans do not think like any species we have encountered. When faced with superior force, instead of seeking surrender terms, they seek ways to make their enemies pay the highest possible price for victory. And you believe they would actually fight a full-scale war against the Empire? I believe they would fight until every human was dead rather than accept subjugation, Vexthar said quietly. During our engagement, their commanding officer stated that humans preferred death to slavery. Based on their actions, I believe this was not a threat, but a simple statement of fact. The war room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zarathi Empire had built its expansion on the principle that overwhelming force would compel rational species to surrender rather than face extinction. They had never encountered a species that considered extinction preferable to conquest. What do our xenopsychologists recommend? Grand Marshal Kolthek asked. Chief xenopsychologist Tekmar emerged from the scientific advisory panel, his forearms carrying the reports that had disturbed the Empire's best minds. Grand Marshal, humans appear to suffer from what we can only classify as species-wide aggressive paranoia. They assume that any sufficiently powerful external force represents an existential threat. He activated additional displays showing human defensive preparations. Since Admiral Vexthar's fleet withdrew, humans have accelerated their military development at an unprecedented rate. They are converting civilian industrial capacity to military production, implementing universal military training, and developing new weapon systems specifically designed to counter our technology. In 3 months? In 3 months. Grand Marshal, human industrial capacity is approximately 40 times larger than our initial estimate suggested. They have been concealing their true population and manufacturing capability through deliberate misdirection. Supreme Admiral Hexgorth studied the tactical displays with growing concern. How many humans are there? Conservative estimates suggest 12 billion individuals across 47 colony worlds and hundreds of industrial stations. They appear to have been expanding quietly for over a century while maintaining the appearance of a single-world primitive species. Grand Marshal Kolthek rose from the command throne, his massive form casting shadows across the war room. Are you telling this council that we have discovered a species of 12 billion individuals, all of whom are trained warriors, possessing industrial capacity we underestimated by a factor of 40? Yes, Grand Marshal, Tekmar replied, and they're now aware that the Empire exists and considers them a target for conquest. The strategic implications hit the room like a physical blow. The Empire had faced resistance before, but never from a species that combined advanced technology, massive industrial base, sophisticated military doctrine, and absolute refusal to surrender under any circumstances. Options. Grand Marshal Kolthek demanded. Supreme Admiral Hexgorth consulted his tactical computers. We could assemble a fleet of 500 ships, 10 times the force Admiral Vexthar commanded. Overwhelming force might compel surrender. And if it doesn't, then we face a prolonged war against an enemy that possesses unknown military capabilities and considers death preferable to defeat. Intelligence Director Vexshala added her analysis. Grand Marshal, we must also consider the psychological effect on our other tributary species. If humans successfully resist the Empire, it might inspire rebellion among our existing territories. What about diplomacy? Chief xenopsychologist Tekmar suggested. Perhaps humans could be negotiated with rather than conquered. Grand Marshal Kolthek's mandibles clicked in disapproval. The Empire does not negotiate with primitives. With respect, Grand Marshal, Admiral Vex, interrupted, humans are not primitives. They may lack our most advanced technology, but their tactical sophistication exceeds anything in our experience. They defeated my fleet using our own strategic assumptions against us. The room fell silent again as everyone contemplated the unprecedented situation. For 2 centuries, the Empire had faced only one strategic decision: how quickly to complete each conquest. Now they faced a species that might actually be capable of fighting back. There is another factor to consider, Intelligence Director Vekshala said reluctantly. During the engagement, humans demonstrated detailed knowledge of our technology and tactics. They had prepared countermeasures specifically designed for our weapon systems. How is that possible? First contact occurred during Admiral Vexthar's mission. We believe humans have been observing the Empire for some time, possibly decades. They may have developed their entire military doctrine around the assumption that they would eventually face us in combat. Supreme Admiral Hexgorth studied the tactical displays with new respect for their enemy. They were preparing for war with us before we knew they existed. It appears so. Human defensive doctrine assumes that any sufficiently advanced species will attempt conquest rather than peaceful contact. They have been planning for this war longer than we have been planning to fight it. Grand Marshal Kolthek returned to his throne, the weight of command evident in his posture. Recommendations? Immediate military expansion, Supreme Admiral Hexgorth suggested. If we are to fight humans, we need forces specifically designed to counter their tactics. Diplomatic contact, Chief Xenopsychologist Tekmar countered. Humans appear to respect strength. If we approach them from a position of equality rather than superiority, negotiation might be possible. Preemptive strike, Intelligence Director Vekshala added, before they can complete their military expansion. Every day we delay, they become more dangerous. Admiral Vexthar spoke last. Grand Marshal, I have fought humans. I have watched them turn impossible situations into victories through sheer determination and tactical innovation. My recommendation is to treat them as equals and hope they are willing to accept peaceful coexistence. The Empire does not treat primitives as equals. Then, the Empire may need to learn how, Vexthar replied quietly. Because these primitives have already demonstrated they can defeat us. The war room erupted in angry voices as the council debated options that range from immediate invasion to diplomatic recognition. But Admiral Vexthar remained silent, staring at the tactical displays that showed human space. Somewhere in that small system, 12 billion warriors were preparing for a war they believed was inevitable. They had spent 3 months converting their entire civilization into a military machine designed for one purpose: making the Empire pay such a terrible price for conquest that victory would be meaningless. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vexthar wondered if the Empire had finally encountered an enemy they couldn't defeat. The debate raged around him, but his attention was focused on a single fact that terrified him more than any human weapon. During their entire engagement, the humans had never asked for mercy, never requested quarter, and never shown the slightest indication that they considered surrender a viable option. They had fought as if death was acceptable, but defeat was not. In the galaxy's long history of warfare, the Zarathi Empire had never faced anything like that before. 6 months after the failed conquest of Earth, the Imperial Council chamber on Zerath Prime witnessed something unprecedented in the Empire's 2-century history. Captain Sarah Chan walked through the massive doors carrying a simple metal container, flanked by an honor guard of human marines whose powered armor made them look like walking monuments to warfare. The chamber itself was designed to intimidate lesser species. Soaring walls displayed the conquered territories of 43 civilizations, each one a testament to Zarathi military supremacy. The council throne sat atop a platform carved from a single massive crystal, symbolizing the Empire's unshakable foundation. Today, that foundation felt less certain. Grand Marshal Kolthek observed the human delegation with the wariness of a predator recognizing another apex hunter. Captain Chun moved with the confident stride of someone who had never learned to fear, while her Marines scanned the chamber with the professional attention of soldiers expecting trouble. Captain Chun, Grand Marshal Kolthek rumbled, his massive form radiating authority from the crystal throne. You requested this audience under diplomatic protocols. State your business. Sarah stopped at the center of the chamber and set the metal container on the ancient war table that had witnessed the surrender of dozens of species. The soft thud of metal on stone seemed unnaturally loud in the vast space. Grand Marshal Kolthek, she said formally, I come bearing a message from the United Earth Government and evidence of our commitment to peace between our species. Evidence? Yes, sir. But first, I should explain what has happened in our space over the past 6 months. Sarah gestured, and her technical officer activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The projection showed the Sol system, but it looked nothing like the solar system Admiral Vex Thar had attempted to conquer. As you can see, humans have been busy since your fleet's visit. We've constructed 17 new military shipyards, fortified every major asteroid in the system, and deployed defensive platforms around each of our inhabited worlds. The display shifted to show massive industrial complexes floating in space, each one larger than many planetary cities. Our manufacturing capacity has increased by a factor of 12. Every human colony world is now capable of producing military-grade spacecraft and weapons systems. Grand Marshal Kolthek studied the projections with growing unease. Impressive for primitives, but industrial capacity alone does not win wars. You're absolutely right, Sarah agreed. That's why we've also made other preparations. The display changed again, showing the outer edge of the solar system. What had once been empty space now bristled with defensive structures and mobile platforms. We've positioned kinetic weapons platforms throughout the Kuiper Belt, each one capable of accelerating asteroid-sized projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Any fleet approaching Earth will face approximately 10,000 guided kinetic weapons before they reach the inner planets. Supreme Admiral Hex Gorath leaned forward on his smaller throne. Kinetic weapons are effective against individual ships, but they cannot stop a properly dispersed fleet. True again, Sarah said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's why we've developed other countermeasures. Would you like to see what happened when Admiral Zexkar tested our defenses? The name hit the Council like a physical blow. Admiral Zexkar had commanded the Empire's most advanced stealth fleet, vessels designed to infiltrate enemy systems without detection. His ships had been missing for 2 months, presumed lost to mechanical failure during a deep space mission. Admiral Zexkar attempted to scout your defenses? Intelligence Director Vexshala asked, her voice tight with professional concern. He attempted to infiltrate our system with 12 stealth ships 2 months ago, Sarah confirmed. Unfortunately for him, humans have been fighting wars in space for over a century. We've learned to watch for things that most species don't think to look for. The display showed sensor readings from the edge of the Sol system. At first, the space appeared empty, but human detection systems revealed heat signatures, gravitational distortions, and drive emissions that mark the positions of supposedly invisible ships. Stealth technology is impressive, Sarah continued, but it's designed to fool sensors, not human intuition. Our patrol crews notice things that your computers missed. Unexpected cosmic ray deflections, minute gravitational variations, even the absence of expected background radiation. What happened to Admiral Zexkar's fleet? Grand Marshal Kolthek demanded. Sarah's expression grew somber. That brings us to the evidence I mentioned. She opened the metal container with careful precision. Inside, cushioned by shock-absorbing foam, lay the severed head of Admiral Zexkar. His yellow eyes stared sightlessly upward, and his mandibles were frozen in an expression of terminal surprise. The council chamber erupted in shocked hisses and clicking mandibles. Even by Zarathi standards, displaying the severed head of a military commander was an act of unprecedented audacity. Admiral Zexkar died fighting, Sarah said quietly. His ship was disabled by our defensive systems, but he refused our offer to surrender. He chose to detonate his own reactor rather than accept capture. We recovered his body from the wreckage and preserved it according to what our xenoanthropologists believe are Zarathi military honors. She closed the container gently. Admiral Zexkar was a warrior. He died as one. We respect that, even though we were enemies. Grand Marshal Kolthek found himself in the unprecedented position of being simultaneously outraged and impressed. The humans had destroyed an entire stealth fleet, preserved enemy remains according to proper protocol, and then delivered them personally to demonstrate their military capabilities. You killed Admiral Zexkar and his entire fleet, Supreme Admiral Hexgoroth said, his voice deadly quiet. Admiral Zexkar killed himself rather than surrender, Sarah corrected. His fleet chose to fight rather than withdraw. We accommodated their wishes. And now you come here to threaten us? Actually, I came here to prevent a war that would cost millions of lives on both sides. Sarah gestured, and her technical officer displayed new images. These showed not human military installations, but Zarathi space. Over the past 6 months, we've been watching your empire's military preparations. Fleet concentrations near our borders, industrial expansion on 17 worlds, conscription of auxiliary forces from tributary species. You're preparing for a war of conquest. Intelligence Director Vexshala's complexion paled. How could you possibly have intelligence on our internal military preparations? The same way we detected Admiral Zexkar's stealth fleet. Humans are very good at watching our enemies and learning from what we see. The implications were staggering. If humans had intelligence assets operating inside Zarathi space, their defensive preparations were only part of a larger strategic picture. What do you want? Grand Marshal Kolthek asked finally. Sarah straightened, and for a moment, every human in the chamber seemed to radiate the same quiet confidence. We want peace, Grand Marshal, but we want peace on terms that both species can accept with honor. State your terms. First, formal recognition of human sovereignty over our current territory. Second, establishment of diplomatic relations between our governments. Third, negotiated trade agreements that benefit both species. And if we refuse, Sarah's expression grew deadly serious. Then, you'll discover why humans have never lost a war when our survival was at stake. You would fight the entire Zarathi Empire, if necessary. But, Grand Marshal, I hope you'll consider the alternative. The display shifted one final time, showing projections of what a full-scale war might look like. The numbers were sobering. Millions of casualties, decades of warfare, entire star systems reduced to radioactive debris. Humans don't want to fight the Empire, Sarah continued. But we've been preparing for that war since the moment we detected your first scout ships in our territory. Every human knows that our survival depends on making conquest too expensive for you to attempt. She gestured toward the container, holding Admiral Zexkar's head. That's 12 of your best ships, and their crews destroyed by our defensive systems while we were still building them. Imagine what we could accomplish with our complete military at full readiness. Chief Xenopsychologist Tekmar spoke up from his position among the advisors. Captain Shun, your species appears to view warfare as an acceptable solution to diplomatic problems. How can the Empire trust humans to honor any agreement? Because humans understand the difference between necessary war and profitable war, Sarah replied. We fight when we have to. We prefer to trade when we can. The choice is yours. Grand Marshal Kolthek rose from his throne, his massive form casting long shadows across the chamber. For 2 centuries, the Empire had faced only one decision when encountering new species: how quickly to complete their conquest. Now he faced a species that had demonstrated they could not be conquered by conventional means, had intelligence capabilities that penetrated imperial security, and possessed military doctrines specifically designed to make invasion too costly to attempt. "The Council will consider your proposal," he said finally. "Thank you, Grand Marshal. I'll remain in the system for 72 hours to receive your answer. And if the answer is refusal?" Sarah picked up the container, holding Admiral Zexkar's head, and met the Grand Marshal's gaze directly. "Then, the next time we meet, Grand Marshal, it will be under very different circumstances." She turned and walked toward the chamber exit, her Marines falling into formation around her. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. "Grand Marshal, humans have a saying, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Today, I'm offering you the easy way." The delegation left, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. On the war table, a few drops of preservative fluid marked where Admiral Zexkar's head had rested, physical evidence that the galaxy's most powerful empire had just been given an ultimatum by a species they had considered primitive. Grand Marshal Kolthek stared at the tactical displays showing human space. Somewhere in that small system, 12 billion warriors were waiting for his answer. They had already demonstrated they could destroy Imperial fleets, penetrate Imperial security, and treat impossible odds as acceptable starting conditions. For the first time in the Empire's history, the question wasn't whether they could conquer a species. The question was whether they could afford to try. 3 days later, the Empire formally recognized human sovereignty and established the first diplomatic treaty between equals in Zarathi history. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of negotiation had begun. And, somewhere in the Sol system, Captain Sarah Chan smiled as she read the treaty documents, knowing that humanity had just achieved something no other species in the galaxy had managed. They had made the Empire blink first. The head on the table had delivered its message. Peace was possible, but only between equals. The galaxy would never be the same.